Hey y'all, it's Grant Fletcher. Thanks for listening to another episode of the 69-Minute Eargasm with Joel Gertner, and this week we are reaching back into the archives of what would have been Extreme Championship Wednesday, but again, like we said last week, we are bringing that concept here to the Eargasm, and so here's the deal. I know we told you we had Raven on tap this week, but it turns out that file that we recorded all the way back in 2020 wasn't quite usable for this week. Now, don't fret, because Joel and I are going to put that one back together for you. It's going to be a great episode, I promise you, but all that said, we do have another great episode on tap for you. Another episode recorded in September of 2020 as well, when Joel and I looked back at ECW Anarchy Rulz 1999. So without further ado, let's get started chopping that one up. Everybody, hope you enjoy it. Be sure you hit subscribe wherever you are, on YouTube, on your favorite podcast app, and be sure you are following us on social media. I'm Grant Fletcher, he's Joel Gertner, and this is ECW Anarchy Rulz 1999. I do take exception to the fact that you said this was going to be an entertaining podcast, because now the pressure is on, and I don't know how I can deal with that.
You'll be fine. Just be yourself, and then when you feel like you're being yourself overtly, out loud, and directly, do the exact opposite.
Duly noted. Well, Joel, I think we should go ahead and give the people a taste of what they're going to be hearing on this one, because we've got a pretty fun subject here to tackle on this very first episode.
Indeed.
All right, we're going to be talking about Anarchy Rulz 1999, and I think this is a pretty solid ECW pay-per-view. I'd rank it amongst my favorites, actually.
Yeah, it comes up as a lot of people's favorite. It comes up judged by a lot of people as one of what they think are the best pay-per-views from ECW at a time where we had just started on TNN, at a time where a lot of people believe we were kind of in our creative prime, and kind of just nationally at a time where a lot of people were getting to see. So many people have a soft spot for ECW of 95, 96, 97. But behind the scenes, with all the machinations going on, we were not ready for prime time on a national or global level, so to speak, in 1995, 1996. When the creative juices really get flowing, there's a lot of talent starting to show up, everything like that. But in 99, what you have is not only a great product, but you also have one that's ready. We've been picked up by TNN. We've got video games with Acclaim. We've got a magazine. We've got, what am I missing? We've got San Francisco toy makers doing action figures. So a lot of stuff is starting to go well for ECW. And we really, it's a show where everything is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I'm glad you helped me set the stage here, but let's go ahead and examine where ECW is, or at least where we're at for this show in particular, and where the wrestling industry is as a whole. I mean, 1999 is a very hot year for wrestling. Let's take a look here. Anarchy Rulz 1999 was broadcast on September 19th, 1999 from the Odeum Expo Center in Villa Park, Illinois. There were 6,000 people in attendance. Wikipedia has the max occupancy at 5,500, so I'm guessing it's good that the fire marshal didn't stop by that day. Joey Styles says...
Any day.
Any day there's an ECW show.
Any day at the ECW arena, any day. Yeah, we always packed it out. We were always... you could count... You would need more than 2 hands and 2 feet to count the number of times, probably per year, that we would break fire code. And I absolutely, as somebody who was in Monaca, Pennsylvania at the Golden Dome for November to Remember 97, as somebody who was at Lakefront Arena in New Orleans, near to where you're from, as somebody who was at some of our more largely attended shows, I absolutely believe, you can't always believe a statistic, especially from professional wrestling, but you'd have to disprove to me to get me to not believe that there were about 6,000 people in that building. It was jam-packed.
Well, Joey Styles mentions that it is the largest crowd that has ever seen an ECW show live on commentary. It takes in $208,000 at the live gate, and it's the first time that ECW has reached the $200,000 mark on the live gate. Also, it does a .23 pay-per-view buy rate, which is about 85,000 buys. So, just to compare to the other two companies here, not to detract or throw anything on, but so that same month, WWE, now WWF, is going to broadcast Unforgiven. There's going to be 15,779 in attendance, taking in $505,477 at the live gate. No surprise there. The WWE was firing on all cylinders here in 1999, but by comparison, WCW Fall Brawl 1999 has 7,491 people in attendance, only 3,347 paid, making their live gate $94,672. So it's crazy to me. I mean, because you could argue that, sure, WCW is going to sell more pay-per-views worldwide. You've got more people in the building to buy merchandise. So I'm not arguing that WCW didn't make as much or made less money than ECW on this pay-per-view as a whole, but there were less people willing to pay money to see WCW live in September of 99 than there were to see ECW.
On those nights in that month, absolutely. That happened. That was not, people might be surprised to learn about it, but that was not individually case versus case. That was not our only business beat of WCW. There were other times where, depending on the metric, you look at that metric, and whether it's attendance, whether it's, however you could look at it. But I remember around that time, late 99, mid 99, when we were negotiating for TNN, announced for TNN, starting TNN, and with WCW starting their decline, I absolutely remember that there was case versus case, just like the one you talked about now, where we did beat WCW on business.
It's insane to think about. Just to also put it into perspective, this is around the time that Eric Bischoff is going to be relieved of his duties, let go, fired, however you want to frame it. It's a little more complicated than that. Also around this time, on the ECW hotline, it's teased that the Ultimate Warrior was interested in coming to ECW. That got further confirmed when Warrior himself went online on his website and wrote a post confirming that he was interested in ECW. But Meltzer reported in The Observer that he didn't think it was ever going to happen, and spoiler alert, it did not happen. I think all three of the companies on their hotlines were guilty of doing things like this, teasing things like this. But was there any serious talk within the company that you heard about Warrior coming in?
I don't remember hearing anything about it. No, beyond it being a hotline entry, and beyond Warrior talking about it through his media, I don't remember it being discussed amongst us in the locker room, at least not in the circles that I was in, I guess, at the time. But no, it wasn't on my radar at all. It would have been amazing. I mean, we were losing Tazz at the time to WWE, and he was working his way out of the company. It would have been amazing for Ultimate Warrior maybe to cost him the title, and that would be a way where he wouldn't have to do a job to one individual talent. As opposed to the way they, that it actually happened and they went about it. Not that it would have been necessarily better, it just would have been different. But they could have done anything with Ultimate Warrior. Probably he would have been better off as a heel. He would have been best as a heel, I think, with our demographic and with our fan base. But again, I mean, you could have done anything with him, and it would have worked, I think.
Yeah, much like ECW did with Jimmy Snuka, I think around 94, 95, something like that, pretty similar like that. But I would imagine that, it wouldn't be the first time a wrestler used a rumor to kind of maybe bolster their own stock. So it is understandable. Also, pretty recently in ECW history around this time, Raven has returned. He's come back from WCW. He signed a 1-year deal. And a lot of people are thinking that, maybe what's happening here is he has a deal with WCW where he can't go to the WWF, so he's just kind of biding his time for the 1 year with ECW. Was that what people were thinking, or do you think Paul Heyman was going to try to keep him after that 1 year?
Don't know. I don't know the intricacies of that. I'm not sure. I don't know if he would have had a non-compete where he couldn't go to WWE. knowing that would make the difference as far as kind of weighing in. So I'm not sure. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, of course he does end up coming back, or rather going back to the WWE because he was there before. Also around that time, WCW released several wrestlers, and it's reported in the Wrestling Observer News that Paul Heyman was interested in a few of them, especially guys like Super Callow, and he was even willing to bring back Mikey Whipwreck, but only part-time because he didn't want to set a precedent that they'd make someone a main star who had left for WCW. But it's reported that Paul Heyman has made clear that he was not interested in Sandman. He just didn't want him back because of the way that he left ECW beforehand. Of course, we know he does end up bringing back Sandman for TNN TV. What do you remember hearing about the likes of Mikey Whipwreck and Sandman as far as whether or not they were welcome in ECW and how Paul Heyman felt or the locker room in general felt about having them back?
Really, to a person, I mean, it's kind of just like life. There wasn't kind of a Kool-Aid drinking kind of chanting kind of company line. I don't think. I think depending on who you ask, people, some people might have been happy for Mikey that if he got better money, and Sandman if he got better money. It depends. If you're talking to a talent who at the time was focused on their money and thought other talents should be as well, versus kind of being. Some people want to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. Some people have loyalty to the company that made them. Some people are in it to chase the dollar. Some people are in it for their creative, control kind of, for lack of a better term, but their creative contributions being welcome. Different people prioritize things differently and on a business level govern themselves accordingly. And I think it would depend on who you ask and in what context and when you ask them, what kind of response you would get to whether that talent might be upset or otherwise that Mikey Whipwreck or Sandman had left and that they might be coming back and the handling of such. So, I think it really would depend who you ask.
Yeah, and speaking of business and money, it's also around this time, too, that Shane Douglas is claiming that ECW owes him $140,000. Now, Paul Heyman disputes this. He says that he owes him somewhere more around the range of $40,000 and that ECW is making payments to Douglas. But Shane Douglas claims that they've only made one payment to him. How, after having been there, how is it that, or not just ECW in general, but the wrestling business in general, that a talent and a promotion or promoter rather could be that far apart on money? Could it be something with his downside guarantee or what he thought the houses might have been or what the company might have thought the houses might have been or what his percentage of that was or something along those lines?
Yeah, it could have been. I mean, are we counting pay-per-view bonuses or not? Which, I think I can say that for me, I got bonuses for the first 3 and then that stopped. So are we counting bonuses or not? Are we counting merchandise or not? Are we counting, Shane was the local promoter for Pittsburgh? Are we counting, there's so much going on between the merchandise and between him promoting shows locally and between, are we counting pay-per-view bonuses or not? There are so many aspects of, like you say, is there a base salary plus other money that comes in if houses are good? I mean, it could be anything. It's like a rider. It's like you're a band and you've got a rider and, you want M&Ms in the back and only if they're green. And it's just, you never know how somebody's contract is delineated until you look at it or until you ask them and they tell you the truth about it. And so how they could be that far apart is, I guess there was Shane's math and there's Paul's math. And one of them's right and the other one's wrong, or somewhere in between. There's some sort of happy medium, but yeah, I mean, I would believe it, especially if Shane was handling office duties, if he was promoting shows in the Pittsburgh area. I would absolutely believe, even at that time in mid to late '99, I would believe that he could have been owed money. Absolutely.
Well, as they say, there's 3 sides to every story. And speaking of another talent that there might be some turmoil with, as you had touched on a little bit earlier, just a month after agreeing to a 3-year contract with ECW, it appears as if Tazz, who's the current ECW heavyweight champion, is headed to the WWE, which means, of course, he's expected to drop the title. Now, it's reported here that Tazz and Heyman are trying to present this as an amicable split since they still have to work together for that, final 3 months of the agreement before Tazz ultimately ends up debuting at the Royal Rumble the following year. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of friction, it says, mostly between Tazz and his agent and Paul Heyman when negotiating a new contract that would make Tazz by far the highest paid wrestler in ECW. Do you remember any kind of tension there or friction whenever it concerned Tazz?
I think if I remember correctly, looking back at the time, I think I remember that Tazz was a little more, he would be more likely during this period of time at the end to joke around in ways that he might prior not have joked around. Just stuff like, not necessarily about the company itself, but about him being on the way out, and not like it's hard to explain, but because Tazz was always he was obviously not as serious as he was when he was out in front of the camera. But he was but he was always professional, and he was always kind of, it's hard to kind of put a handle on it. But when he was in his last weeks, his last few months in ECW, I think he might be more apt to say certain flippant kind of, just off the cuff kind of remarks. Like just kind of almost like gallows humor, almost like the kind of thing like towards the end, like by the same time, like September, October of 2000. Everybody's joking around about the company going out of business. Not that we saw it absolutely coming, but when paychecks start to get skipped or paychecks start bouncing, people start kind of just acting a certain way, making certain kind of jokes. So, it could be looked at that during this time, Tazz's demeanor is slightly different than maybe it previously had been. But that's, that's my opinion. I think that's just one person's kind of observation and remembrance of it.
Yeah, and to be clear here, it says it's reported at least that Tazz didn't actually sign the deal, the 3-year deal, but he did sign a letter of intent. So it's not like he's backing out of an actual contract that was set up, but evidently his lawyer was able to get a meeting with Vince McMahon, and, well, the rest is history there. But that's really going to be the setup here for the championship picture going in to the pay-per-view. Now, as for the event itself, the dark match of the night was Danny Doring and Roadkill defeating Billy Wiles and C.W. Anderson in a tag team match. Man, Roadkill and Danny Doring, I think, were poised to do a lot more towards the end of ECW, and they really got cut off there prematurely, didn't they?
Yeah, they would have benefited from maybe starting in the company a year or two earlier than they did. They had been around the company for a bit. They were trainees from the House of Hardcore, so they actually were around from the mid '90s. But by the time they're on TV and they're really within top guys within the tag team division, and they're kind of starting to make a name for themselves, get TV time, cut promos, have gimmicks, and everything like that. By that time, again, you're looking at, the latter part of 1999, and, ECW really wasn't around much in 2001. So when you're in the latter part of 1999, you're talking about, 15 or 16 months until the end of the promotion. So, good for them that they were able to showcase their talents on TNN. I guess the timing could have been worse, but the timing for them also could have been a lot better. And it would have been nice if, back around the time of so many tag teams, ECW really had a great tag team division, 95, 96, 97, the Gangsters, the Eliminators, the Dudleys, Gordy and Williams, Crawford and Furnace. There was such good stuff going on. It would have been great if they could have been involved in some of that, but just timing wise, they were young and they were in school. They were in wrestling school.
Yeah, let's move on to the actual pay-per-view here. The show opens with a clip of Masato Tanaka pulling up to the arena outside, who, of course, is going to be challenging Tazz for the ECW title later on that night. And then Steven Prazak attempts to interview him, but he's cut off by Judge Jeff Jones, who pulls right up and starts harassing them about being in his way. So Tanaka pie faces Jeff Jones, and he enters the building, which leads to Jones saying that later that night, Tanaka will pay a price, and the price will be awesome. Little foreshadowing there for us.
Mm-hmm.
We cut to the ring, and we're welcomed by Joey Styles and Cyrus the Virus. Of course, Cyrus is here representing the network, TNN. He keeps referring to the office. Joey Styles insists there is no office. It's a lot of fun back and forth that they have there.
There is no office. That's great.
And then, right. It was just a basement, right?
Yep.
And then they throw to the ECW intro, the one that we know so well, where, clips may have been changed out, but the format was pretty similar for a long time there with the ECW music, with the Paul Heyman modulated voiceover. Who would have been responsible for putting that intro together?
Paul with Ron and Charlie. Yeah. Paul with Ron and Charlie, Paul with Charlie, Paul with one of the TV guys, I think.
Yeah, to be clear, Ron and Charlie would have been the TV guys, the production crew, right? The videographers and the production team as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, Ron Buffon and Charlie Versailles, and it was at Ron's parents' house, where in the basement on the ironing board and everything else, everything you hear about, a lot of the time that we were, quote unquote, at the ECW arena in the back, we were actually not. We actually had an ECW banner that was hanging up, and we were in Ron's parents' home in the basement, and that's the deal. That was like you say, there was no office, like Joey says.
There's actually a little of glimpse of that in the Beyond the Mats documentary.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a little inside baseball right there from Joel Gertner. Our first match on the pay-per-view is Jerry Lynn versus Lance Storm, who's coming out with Dawn Marie. Jerry Lynn comes out. He's got his ribs taped up here. They're doing this whole injury angle with Jerry Lynn. It's very wrestling. As you said, the last territory, it very much is kind of has that sort of territory wrestling feel to it. He's even been wrestling with his ribs taped up and had some recent wars with Rob Van Dam on Hardcore TV. And even the previous week, he was jumped by the Impact player, of course. The Impact players. Of course, that being Lance Storm and Dawn Marie, Just Incredible, and Johnny Smith, who's recently allied himself with the stable at this point in time. The match is a technical and athletic showcase for both wrestlers. Lance Storm, he targets the taped ribs throughout. The match gets extreme when Jerry Lynn hits a diving plancha from the top rope to the outside. We see Dawn Marie get involved by throwing a chair that ultimately gets used on Lance Storm and also assists Lance Storm in getting out of a couple of pin attempts. Jerry Lynn hits a diving Hurricane Rana, but eventually his injured ribs just give out on him, and Storm hits a knee in Lynn's ribs and pins him using a 3/4 Nelson for the win there. The match goes for 16 minutes and 38 seconds bell to bell. And then the Observer gets 3.25 stars, man. It's a great match. I'd say if you're only going to watch one match from this pay-per-view, this would be the one.
Yeah, last week I was on Twitter and I tweeted that I was watching this match and Anarchy Rulz 99 in preparation for doing this podcast recording. And I just mentioned that Lance Storm and Jerry Lynn in this match, it holds up 21 years later so well, just completely, that you could put it on an episode of next week's NXT TV or AEW TV or Raw or SmackDown or Impact or anywhere. You could put it on television today and it's going to grab eyes and it's going to keep eyes and it's going to get people interested in the product. And it was an excellent opening match for this show. And just two great talents, man. I may be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure it is these two. I'm pretty sure it's Jerry Lynn and Lance Storm. I think there was a house show that we did where they challenged each other. I could be misremembering. It could be one of them against Candido. I'm not sure. I think it might have been Jerry Lynn and Lance Storm where they challenged each other to do a match where neither one of them took a back bump. And they got it done. It was unbelievable. Yeah. That happened on an ECW house show. So stuff like, you have to be a master at your trade to know how to, you know what I mean? That's like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with no peanut butter and jelly, you know what I mean? Let alone any bread. But it's magic when you can just do something like that, go out there 10, 15, 20 minutes and just kind of chain wrestle and just kind of, read the other guy's body language or just, toss spots to each other unseen and just all of the fluency and magic and just skill that comes with being a pro wrestler and doing something that's, part carnival trick and part stuntman and part sport and part performance art and entertainment. And just, you need to be well versed in so many different aspects. And both those guys are just, if it's going to happen, those are the guys that are going to get it done. And this match proves it. I mean, just it's an unbelievable match. If you're the kind of person that rates matches on Star System or whatever, and if you decide to give this match 5 stars, the last person that's going to talk you out of that is me. Just an incredible match. I had a lot of fun rewatching it last week.
Yeah, the booking really just seems like a no-brainer. You put Jerry Lynn and Lance Storm against each other on pay-per-view, and magic is going to happen. Well, next up, we have Simon Diamond making his way out to the ring. He cuts a promo for his pay-per-view debut, and he says he has a problem because he needs a tag team partner. So he calls up the prodigy, Tom Marquez, who's a recent graduate of the House of Hardcore, to be his tag team partner. But whenever Marquez steps in the ring, he says, Simon didn't say, and so he sends Marquez back out. So all of a sudden, Jazz comes out to interrupt him, and Simon Diamond cuts her down for being a woman, insults her, says she can't be his tag team partner. So Jazz attacks Simon Diamond. So
now, to his credit, he's not completely and only a misogynist, because he also let her know that he didn't say, just like with Marquez. He said, number one, I didn't say, and number two, you're a woman.
That is a key part of the gimmick. You are right. I did leave that out. But what Simon does say is for Tom Marquez to come in and attack Jazz. So that leads to a match between the two of them. Jazz quickly nails a Jazz Stinger to Marquez, and as she's about to cover him for the win, Simon Diamond runs in and attacks Jazz before the pinfall could be counted. And then Tony DeVito joins in on the assault of Jazz as well, which results in a no contest. The match only goes for 58 seconds total. It gets a dud rating, but it's not really, I wouldn't really say it's there to be a match per se. Really a bit of storyline to lead to the next thing coming up here, because what happens is Chris Chetti and Nova make the save, leading to them facing Simon Diamond and DeVito in a tag match. So early on, Chris Chetti gets injured. He does a moonsault and then basically is left laying outside the ring while staff is attending to him, saying that he doesn't have any feeling in his legs. Do you remember anything or any talk about this injury here that Chris Chetti suffered on that night?
I'm trying to think back. I don't specifically.
Yeah, it could have been. It could have been just, he got banged up there or something like that. So might have been the case. Now Nova and Chetti, they do come in hot though, but DeVito turns things around with a low blow to Nova, and at one point DeVito botches a side slam onto Nova, which gets a huge negative reaction from the crowd. Roadkill and Danny Doring then run in and attack both teams, resulting in a no contest. Now, Danny Doring here also has Miss Congeniality in tow, his storyline girlfriend. Do you want to fill everybody in on who Miss Congeniality is?
Miss Congeniality was Lita.
WWE Hall of Famer, Amy Duma. This match right here only goes for 3 minutes, 52 seconds, by the way. Gets -1 star. Again, mostly meant for the story aspect. Because at this point, the locker room empties because Roadkill goes up onto the second rope, and he's about to squash Jazz. So a brawl ensues amongst all these wrestlers that have emptied out until New Jack enters holding his patented, if you can call it patented, trash can full of weapons, and he clears the ring. He even takes a staple gun to the head of Rod Price and puts a few staples in his head as well, because what's a New Jack entrance without a little bit of blood, right?
It's amazing too, though, yeah. And it's that all of these matches are kind of blending together and melding one into the other, and you're getting like comedy stuff, character development stuff. You got a guy like Marquez who gets to make a pay-per-view appearance, and just there's a reason for everything, and you have these kind of, you don't see it on SNL where one sketch kind of goes into the next sketch. But you don't see it a lot on episodic TV wrestling, but it wasn't uncommon for ECW to book in this way, where kind of match number 2 into match number 3, which leads into match number 4. It's not unheard of, but it didn't happen a lot. It was just kind of a booking staple that we relied on, and that it was kind of our calling card and a bread and butter for us.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, too. I mean, these are matches that, like I said, one gets a dud rating, one gets a negative 1-star rating from Dave Meltzer, but, they weren't really there for, the wrestling match aspect. It was more a story, more of a building of the chaos that was a trademark of ECW until the big blow-off there with New Jack making his way out to the ring.
Yep, and it's just a way of, it's a smorgasbord, it's a buffet, it's a 9-course meal, kind of all in the same large segment, because you're getting jazz in the same segment, really, with New Jack. And like I said, you're getting kind of character development and comedy blending into kind of the hardcore and the brawling and of New Jack. So like, you're really getting a kind of, a portion of the show rather than segment 2, segment 3, segment 4. You're just kind of getting like a day in the life of ECW. And it was interesting whenever we portrayed stuff that way.
Well, the next offering on the ECW buffet is Yoshihiro Taijiri versus Little Guido, or Nunzio as he's later called, with Big Sal, versus Super Crazy in an international 3-way dance. Now, it's clear pretty early on that the crowd is overwhelmingly behind Super Crazy, and Super Crazy was always one of my favorite ECW wrestlers. What do you remember about just how popular Super Crazy was with the fans at this point?
He was really popular. He was super over, and he would know, no pun intended. And he was a really cool guy. Kind of similar to, I mean, I don't want to say similar to his gimmick. That's, but just kind of, he was just a real cool guy, kind of laid back, and just, I mean, so super talented though. I mean, kind of guy, you could put him in any promotion in the world. He could wrestle in Mexico. He could wrestle in Japan. He could wrestle for ECW. He could wrestle for WCW or WWE. And he wrestled in many, if not all, those places. But he just always, he was amazing. I mean, some of the stuff you were talking about, the montage before, you were talking about like the animation, the cold open, the video package that started the show, the one that was kind of elongated, 3 minutes or more for pay-per-view. And he was just a highlight reel, man. Some of the stuff that he did was just incredible, even for the time. I mean, Lucha was really, really becoming a mainstay in the U.S. in the mid and late 90s. People in America were starting to get into it, and Rey Mysterio was huge. And just, people were starting to become aficionados of Lucha Libre. But at the same time, because of that, not just any luchador would fit the bill. They knew that some, just like anything else, some guys were better workers than others, and you'd see better lucha libre from some guys than you might from others, so to speak. And just Super Crazy was really, really just at the top of the game, and at the top of his game, man, in his prime, really looking good.
Yeah, and all three of these guys get a good chance to display their skill sets, and they end up complementing each other really well in this match. The match goes out into the crowd, where Taijiri lands an acai moonsault on both of his opponents, before Taijiri and Super Crazy get flattened by Big Sal. Then Super Crazy lands his own acai moonsault to the outside, before he knocks Big Sal from the apron through the timekeeper's table, which effectively takes him out of the match as Little Guido's heater there. Little Guido is then eliminated first when Super Crazy lands a top rope moonsault for the pinfall. The action continues there between Super Crazy and Taijiri. Of course, they're pretty familiar with each other at this point. Super Crazy hits a first turnbuckle moonsault. Then he tries to go up to the second turnbuckle moonsault on the follow-up, but Taijiri gets his knees up. That allows him to hit the buzzsaw kick. And then Yoshihiro Taijiri finishes off Super Crazy with a brainbuster for the pinfall. Match goes for 14 minutes and 38 seconds. Meltzer gives it 3.5 stars.
Great match. Three-way dance, man. Just, another signature of ECW. And this wasn't the only one on the show. We not only would do three-way dances, but we would sometimes have multiple three-way dances on the same show. And it's a great way to get different combinations and permutations and to get as many guys on the show as possible. It's just a great kind of booking device. Just like melding one match into another, this is another kind of booking device that we used where others did not. And yeah, man, this was an unbelievable three-way dance. Guys that just universally, just guys with kind of that global physical linguistic kind of just, Guido had been to Japan and worked with UWFI and trained under Billy Robinson. Like, Guido's a shooter and he's wrestled, in all over the world, and so has Taijiri and so has Super Crazy. And it's just, you've got an American and you've got a Japanese and you've got a Mexican, and it's just a really, really global kind of atmosphere. And that was great, for a town like Chicago, where you've got, a global audience. You know what I mean? You've got a very diverse audience in the crowd. You've got people who, a lot of the non-WWE, non-WCW, when they're seeing independent wrestling, a lot of them are seeing lucha. Just an unbelievable match. I mean, really just checked all the boxes and a really good time.
Next up, we see Steve Corino cutting a backstage promo. He's accompanied by Rhino and a wheelchair-bound Jack Victory, and Corino says that he's supposed to be managing a mystery tag team to challenge Raven and Tommy Dreamer, but for the ECW tag titles later that night. And this is something that's been built up on ECW TV here recently, too. And he reveals that tag team was supposed to be the Insane Clown Posse, but he says that the day before, ICP's manager, Alex Abbas, was told on the phone that they'd be wrestling Raven and Dreamer, so the Insane Clown Posse backed out because they knew that they would lose. Now, it actually turns out that this is somewhat based in fact, because earlier that day, ICP, who was actually at that point in time working without contracts for WCW, went on Mark Madden's radio show and said that they were all set to jump to the ECW, but when they found out they were going to be getting squashed by the tag champs in 2 minutes, they opted to stay with WCW. Which wouldn't be the first time a wrestler or wrestlers decided to back out of a deal whenever they found out they didn't like the way they were going to be used creatively. So Corino declares that he'll be challenging for the tag titles along with Rhino. And then we see Cyrus and Joey Styles, and Cyrus then says that the Insane Clown Posse had a lot of heat back in the WWE locker room, and Joey Styles states that he's surprised Bill Bush, the current WCW executive vice president, would be willing to humiliate himself by taking back ICP at this point whenever they were willing to jump ship for ECW. Is this burial of ICP, do you think that's more of an order from Paul Heyman, or do you think there was really a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of people who worked at ECW because they backed out of this deal?
Let me answer with a question of my own, Grant. Would you prefer to hear me answer that question, or would you prefer to get the answer from ICP?
Well, I mean, if you can get any answer from ICP on anything, I say do that.
I'll tell you what I ask. ICP has agreed, and logistics in the last couple of weeks is the only thing that's kept it from having already happened, to be guests on our sister program, the other podcast that you and I have going, the 69-Minute Eargasm. We don't always reveal our guests in advance, but because you're asking me a question about ICP, I'll just let it be known that ICP are very much looking forward to being guests with us on the 69-minute Eargasm. If you're listening to this podcast, know that we do, Grant and I, have the 69-minute Eargasm available everywhere that you have podcasts. We've had some great guests. We are re-airing our episode with Kamala from a year or so ago in his memory and in his honor. That's the current 69-minute Eargasm that's up. But go through our archives. But I guess before I go on a tangent, we'd love you to listen to old episodes of the Eargasm, but just know that upcoming, we will have as our guests Insane Clown Posse. So Grant, if you don't mind, table this and please feel free to ask them when they're on the show.
I think that's a really good idea. I think that'd be the best way to find out about it. So yeah, y'all go check out the 69-minute Eargasm. Of course, we're recording this episode ahead of time, so most, if not all, of what we just talked about will probably have already happened at this point, which means go check out what's happening in that podcast feed now so you can get a taste of what's going on over there. At this point in the show, though, getting back on subject here, we see Billy Corgan sitting at ringside, and that's pretty cool, man. Not just knowing about the history of Billy Corgan as a performer, but also knowing his history as it relates to wrestling, specifically his involvement with TNA, now Impact Wrestling, and now as the owner of the NWA.
And as urban legend might say, a suitor, a potential one-time owner and investor of ECW. I mean, I've heard it said, not from the office because there was no office, but Billy Corgan came to multiple of our shows and was around and was interested and was a big ECW fan. And, whether you think you're hearing it from somebody and they're just saying it because they think it'll put a smile on your face and give you more confidence in the company, or whether it's something that was said because it was absolutely true, or whether it was somewhere in between. But yours truly had heard, and other people in the company had been told and had been made aware as well, that it would be quite possible that Billy Corgan might be anywhere from an investor to an owner and boss type of ECW in the latter days.
That's really cool to think about it. I mean, there had to have been a conversation somewhere along the way, I would suppose. And that might be where Billy Corgan first got the idea to actually own a wrestling company, to own a promotion.
It could have been. ECW could have been the first one, sure, that he was going to make an active investment and try to, acquire either part or all of. It absolutely could have been. And from there, like you say, he was involved with TNA. In the Chicago area, he had Resistance Pro, and now in charge with the NWA.
Well, it's crazy to think about. Imagine how different, not just ECW's history would have been, but how different wrestling would be today if that had been the case. ECW could still be around, which means he wouldn't necessarily be the owner of the NWA, or maybe he would. So it's crazy to think about, Next up, we've got Sabu versus Justin Incredible. Now, Sabu's recently been reinstated to wrestle in the United States. He's been banned from wrestling in the U.S. I think really what was going on was he was actually wrestling out of the country, and that they needed to write him off of TV. Before the match, Justin Incredible cuts a promo and proclaims that he has something up his sleeve before being handed an envelope by Jason, who's accompanied him to the ring, which Justin Incredible claims is a restraining order for Sabu. Credible then asks ECW ring announcer Bob Artiste to declare him the winner, since Sabu can't even enter the arena under the restraining order, which I think is pretty clever. In a promotion where there are no rules, where rules are far and few between, if non-existent, I should say. And so, your heels have to find a way to get heat somehow, right?
Yep. Yeah, this was a pretty clever way, and it was, smarmy and obnoxious, and just, everything that Justin Incredible in his jorts and his kind of 3/4 shirt, and that he was. It was just apropos for his character. It suited him.
Referee Jim Molina then examines the piece of paper and declares that yes, it is a legal and binding document. However, tonight, There Is No Law, and tonight, Anarchy Rulz. Before Bob Ortiz can begin announcing the competitors, Just Incredible lays into him with a Singapore cane. We're going to call it a Singapore cane on this podcast, by the way, instead of a kendo stick, just because I feel like that's on brand. The lights go out for a brief second, and when they come back on, of course, Sabu is in the ring. Sabu goes on the attack. The match builds outside, and Just Incredible jumps from the top turnbuckle out onto Sabu through a table that's been set up on the ramp. Bill Alfonso is setting up tables and tossing Sabu chairs, allowing Sabu to get in his usual offense. Sabu puts Just Incredible through a table that was set up outside the ring via a springboard leg drop. And then they make it back in. Incredible is juiced, and Sabu's bleeding from the midsection here. Probably got cut from a piece of table here whenever he went through it. Sabu kicks out of one That's Incredible, which is Just Incredible's tombstone pile driver variation. But in the follow-up, Just Incredible lands That's Incredible on a chair, and he gets the pinfall for the win. 14 minutes and 6 seconds. It gets 3 3/4 stars in the Observer. Joel, what'd you think?
I thought it was a good match. I thought, credit to Just Incredible for wrestling Sabu's style of match. Although, when you're on pay-per-view against Sabu, you're going to be wrestling Sabu's style of match anyway, whether you want to or not. But credit to him for being able to get his own stuff in and wrestle Sabu's style of match. And I thought the two of them gelled pretty well. And I thought it was real solid.
One thing I didn't mention here, this is Sabu getting in his offense, but it's the ramp that leads all the way up to the ring. It's level with the bottom of the ring there. Pretty trademark stuff for an ECW pay-per-view. What was your opinion on the ramp leading up to the ring like that?
I thought it was cool. I used to I think they had that kind of ramp in Toronto in the mid 80s for WWF. They had that kind of box kind of ramp. I didn't think too much about it, but I thought it was cool. And then it comes into play. We've seen people go through that ramp, right? We've seen people go through the ring. Taz Bigelow, we've seen in the ring. And then we've also seen people go through that ramp, which you would think is an impossibility. You might think it's solid, or at least if it's hollow-ish, you might think that at least it's got some heft to it. If you're going to have all these guys that are 300 and 400 pounds, 6-man tags and whatnot, you're going to have, 1,000 pounds on it at any given time. So obviously, it's not the kind of thing that you can just crumple up and throw away. So to see somebody go through it was cool. But, I thought it was cool, but I didn't put much thought into it.
Yeah, I thought it was just kind of a cool way to change up the presentation there for a pay-per-view, differentiated a little bit more from television. Next up, we've got Tazz versus Masato Tanaka defending the ECW Heavyweight Championship. Before the match, Tazz is showered with streamers as he enters the ring, but he's booed during his introductions as the fans chant, "You sold out." And before the match starts, we see that the fans are looking off in some direction. They're distracted by something. We hear chants of, "Let him go, let him go." And then Tazz spots Mike Awesome in the crowd, and he's accompanied by Judge Jeff Jones. Paul Heyman's there to intervene, but Tazz tells Paul Heyman to let Mike Awesome into the match, and Paul Heyman says if Tazz wanted to put the belt on the line, then we'll make it a 3-way dance. And the crowd goes crazy. Tazz is unleashing suplexes here left and right as things start up, but he's quickly caught by Tanaka with a roaring elbow. Awesome then follows up with an awesome splash, and the two pile on top of the pinfall, which really quickly eliminates Tazz and takes him right out of the match. At this point, the locker room empties to watch the match from the ramp, and the two war with each other all around the ring, up and down the ramp. Joey Styles is really selling that Tanaka could be both the FMW and the ECW champion concurrently here because he is the champion of FMW, which is kind of a sister promotion of ECW at this point, right?
Yeah, they brought ECW over for joint tours and stuff like that. Yeah, there was a working relationship.
Yeah, Mike Awesome kicks out of a tornado DDT onto a pair of chairs, which is the same move that beat him the year prior at Heatwave. And then Mike Awesome bombs Tanaka through a table to the outside, which is also payback for something that had happened at Heatwave prior. So they're really trying to mirror that match at this point in time. Tanaka attempts to drive Mike Awesome through a table with a superplex, but Awesome countered with an awesome bomb onto the table to win the title. After the match, Tazz handed over the title to Awesome and shook hands with him in the ring. Tazz then made his exit, and we briefly see him hug Paul Heyman on the ramp. And then Mike Awesome shakes hands with Masato Tanaka before celebrating along with Judge Jones in the ring. It goes for 13 minutes and 48 seconds bell to bell. It gets 3 3/4 stars in the Observer. Not bad. Not bad at all.
No, not at all. Cleverly booked. Mike Awesome comes into the match. Now it's a three-way dance. We already had a three-way dance earlier. This is one that wasn't expected. So, the fans get something extra and they get something cool when you add Mike Awesome into the match. Tazz gets taken out first and taken out early. And that's number one, unexpected. And on the other end of it means that now the two guys who are left in the ring, you're guaranteed one of them is going to be a new champion. You're guaranteed that the show you're at and your town just got a title change. So that's cool. Tazz is protected because he doesn't lose the title to any one man in the company. It takes two men to beat him. And then finally, Tazz shakes hands with Mike Awesome, as he had said, a man of his word, that if there was anybody that could beat him, he would shake their hand. So very, very cleverly booked.
Yeah, it all ties together there perfectly. It all seals up there. Now, this ends Tazz's 8-month reign. It's 252 days as champion. Tazz is wrapping up with ECW, of course, like we said. Of course, he ends up finishing up the year here. His final match with the company airs in November when he unsuccessfully challenged Mike Awesome in a rematch for the ECW World title. Of course, there's going to be some controversy here around the ECW title with Mike Awesome, but we're going to cover that a little more in detail on a later episode. Next up, we see Raven on a playground at nighttime where he recaps his 2.5-year-long feud with Tommy Dreamer that went from January of 95 up until Raven left the company for WCW. And Raven says that while he was away, Tommy Dreamer lost focus, and that's why Beulah McGillicuddy's neck was broken by the Dudleys. Of course, during that program, Beulah was with Raven, and then it's revealed that Beulah's pregnant with Tommy Dreamer's baby. Gasp. It's a whole thing. It's a big, long story. And I can't wait to really cover that whole feud in detail as we go along here. And Raven concludes by saying the greatest trick that Devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. And he says, well, Tommy, I exist, really hinting there at the animosity between the two is still going here. It's also reported around this time, too, that a lot of the house show matches for the ECW tag titles have been just quick squashes here. And that's because Tommy Dreamer actually has a back injury. He's got 2 bulging discs, as it's reported on TV, and Raven himself is pretty banged up here. What do you think the thinking would have been, Joel, in putting these two in a program like this, knowing that maybe they both might actually need some time off here really soon?
Everybody just did what they could. Tommy was just such a warrior specifically, and Raven too, a pro and just proud of his work. So even if they're banged up and even if they're legitimately hurt and injured, and these guys, if it's a pay-per-view, if it's something that needs to be done, if there's any way, and of course there is, where it could be booked in such a way where it can be made to work without people getting further hurt or being exposed or anything like that. I think they, both of them probably just wanted to do whatever they needed to do and whatever had to happen. So, and then creative wise, this feud was arguably the best one in the history of ECW. It was one of the longest standing. Like you said, there were so many twists and turns. It was a feud that lasted multiple years. So, I don't know. You do what was done. You just kind of book around the flaws and whatever you're lacking, you just enhance things in other areas, and you just, make the best out of what your situation is.
Now, before the match, Joel Gertner enters and introduces Tommy Dreamer and Francine for a pre-match interview. Joel, you're wearing a pretty slick-looking purple neck brace here. Do you still have that same neck brace?
Hey, yeah. I wear it out to the club all the time. Yeah, of course, man. Keep your gear. Have your gear. Always keep your gear. Yeah, man. When it comes to, I'm a hoarder, dude. Yes. I have. I'm sure I do still have that purple neck brace.
Wait.
All of them,
Did
man.
you just say you're
The
a hoarder?
teal suit with the shorts. A horror.
No, did you just say you're a hoarder?
Oh, yeah. I'm a whore and a hoarder. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say, I thought that the term you used was an archivist, right?
Yes, I'm an archivist. I'm a historian. I'm an archivist. I'm a collector. And beyond that, I am absolutely a hoarder. I deserve to be on like one of those shows on Discovery.
Yeah, I look,
keep
semantics are everything. I just wanted to be clear.
Dude, if I blow my nose, the tissue has sentimental value, man. It's really bad. I'm bad. I'll collect anything at the drop of a hat, man. I don't like to throw. It just, you know what? Like, I don't know. I'm just wired that way. Like, I would rather regret something I do as opposed to regret something that I didn't do, right? Like regret the fact that I left it undone. I'd rather do something and then regret it rather than regret what I didn't do. And just I'm kind of, just some people are like that, man. I was down in your neck of the woods one time and it was 100 degrees and humid. And I, told people where I lived up here in Brooklyn and they were like, oh, I'd rather sweat than shiver. People are just wired different ways. And with me, I don't like to throw stuff out because you can always throw it out. But once you throw it out, if you ever want to have it again, you'll never get it back. Like I'll go through like a box from like last time we moved and I'll find like some old Gertnerisms, like some were used, weren't used, whatever, just kind of brainstorming, and they're jotted down on a piece of scrap paper and I'll look at it. And I know that if I apply myself, of course, I can come up with, if there's 3 of them on the page, if I apply myself, I can come up with 3 others. But I'll look at this piece of paper and I'll say to myself, should I really throw this out? Because if I throw it out, it's gone. And that's kind of how I am. So yeah, I'm a hoarder. But when it comes to the ECW gear, I think that's something a little bit even different because that's personal and that's sentimental and emotional. And that's kind of, like Raven might say, that's the classroom of my youth.
Ah, clever. Tying that into bits of the promo here that Raven gave. Yeah, great segue to get us back on topic here, Joel. Now, here you asked Tommy Dreamer about the status of his back injury and how it's going to affect his tag team title reign and his career as a whole. And Tommy Dreamer said that he had just seen Sammy Sosa perform the day prior. And just like Sammy Sosa, he comes out and does what he does because of the fans that pay his salary. Now, to put that in perspective,
for those who are into, by the way, if I remember correctly from watching it last week, for those who are into baseball trivia and the timing of it all, us being in Chicago, I believe he holds up the ticket, maybe, but I believe he says that he actually not only saw Sammy Sosa, but he saw Sammy Sosa hit his 60th home run. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, he does say he saw him hit number 60 because this is around the time that Sammy Sosa is in a home run race with Mark McGuire there for the home run record. So yeah, that would be correct. Now, before he can continue, though, Tommy Dreamer is cut off by Steve Corino, who's accompanied by Rhino and Jack Victory, who he's pushing in the wheelchair here. And so Steve Corino is going to challenge Tommy Dreamer and Raven, along with Rhino here. Rhino runs into the ring, and the match starts before Raven even comes out. Dreamer takes some punishment to his back, and Rhino hits Francine with a power slam. A lot of people talk about Francine for her contributions to ECW, but I don't think enough people talk about just how tough Francine is for her to take all the punishment that she took over the years.
Oh, dude. Oh, my God. Ridiculous. One of the boys, hands down.
Yeah, I mean, really, watch any kind of Francine compilation, and you'll get a feel for what I'm talking about. Now, Raven, at this point in time, runs in and he makes the save, and then Raven and Dreamer pretty quickly hit simultaneous DDTs on Jack Victory and Steve Corino and pin them to retain the titles. All the while, Raven hasn't even taken off his jacket or his belt at this point in time. Bell to bell, the match goes for 3 minutes and 24 seconds. It gets a dud rating, but, really, I think it's more story than it is wrestling, and that's why. But, in a match like this, well, let's just say at the wrestling buffet, you've got to have matches like that are mostly about story anyway. And why not use that on the match that has a guy with a bad back at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Another case of it being really cleverly booked. In this case, I think because of the timing of it and its location on the show, where it is itemized, because it's coming after so much great stuff. You had Lance and Jerry, and then you had the three-way dance, and then you had the three-way dance for the title right before this. There was so much great stuff that, it was kind of short for a World Tag Team title match. And, for those who would be looking to detract from it, it makes it a lot harder to do that when you put it after so much great stuff. So a lot of people might question why you wouldn't end with the world title match. But, on a show like this, I think it was pretty ideally booked in that I think this match was exactly where it belonged on the card.
Yeah, and after the match, we see Mancow appear on the ramp, and he's backed by two large shirtless men wearing matching pants. He's there to congratulate Raven, and he ends up just walking to the back with Raven. They leave Tommy Dreamer there. And that's really all we see from Mancow on this episode. Joel, do you want to fill our listeners in who may not be familiar about how big of a deal it might have been to have Mancow on an ECW pay-per-view?
Really big. He was the top radio guy in Chicago at the time. He was kind of, what Howard Stern was in his main markets. That's what Mancow was in the Midwest and in Chicago. I mean, it was a big deal. The same way being aligned with ICP and with Limp Bizkit and all of the different celebrity kind of endorsements that we got and partnerships. Having Mancow involved was a huge deal. And from a business aspect, I'm sure, in the couple of weeks leading up to the show, I'm sure he was talking about it all over his show, which gets just incredible listenership throughout the Chicagoland area.
Yeah, and speaking of radio personalities, too, I need you to confirm this for me as well. Throughout the course of this pay-per-view, is that Mark Madden sitting in the front row wearing a football jersey?
I remember you asked me last week to keep an eye out, and I was derelict in my duties. I didn't spot him. I'm not 100% sure whether he's in the crowd or not.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was. I know he was really friendly with ECW. Mark Madden, of course, was working for WCW at the time and previous guest on the 69-Minute Eargasm. It's one of our most downloaded episodes ever. One of our two most downloaded episodes ever.
Great episode. Yeah.
And I recommend checking it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go listen to that. Yeah, for sure.
Now, for our main event, Rob Van Dam was scheduled to defend the World Television Championship against Johnny Smith. Johnny Smith has recently come into the promotion here from Stampede Wrestling and quickly allied himself with the Impact players. Do you want to tell everybody who Johnny Smith was, at least in storyline?
Yeah, Johnny Smith, British wrestler who had wrestled in Europe and wrestled in All Japan. And like you say, came in and joined the Impact players. I'm trying to remember, there was a correlation between Johnny Smith and Davey Boy Smith.
Yeah, that was the idea. That was the idea, is that in storyline, at least, they were supposed to be brothers. They weren't really, but that was what they said in Stampede. Of course, they don't really talk about that too much in ECW. I think they tried to not play up on storyline from Stampede. I'm guessing. I don't know why they wouldn't. But before the main event can get started, Axel Rotten takes to the ring to challenge the new ECW champion, Mike Awesome, to a match for the title, which leads to the Impact players, including Johnny Smith, cutting off Axel Rotten. And he's told by Lance Storm that he needs to rescind that challenge, or the Impact players will rescind it for him. And then the Impact players attack Axel Rotten. Balls Mahoney and Spike Dudley end up making the save. Mahoney hit a chair shot on Smith to the head, which took him out. So Axel Rotten challenged Rob Van Dam to come down to the ring and face Balls Mahoney for the ECW World TV title. Out comes RVD with Bill Alfonso, and this is, it's important to note too, we're getting near the end of RVD's iconic 700-day title reign as well, just to set the stage for where we are in ECW here. Now, the match starts with some solid wrestling from both guys in the ring before spilling outside to the crowd. And, I think this is a side of Balls Mahoney that we don't really think of too much whenever you say the name Balls Mahoney. Typically you think of the chair-swinging freak, right? But
typically you do, yeah.
Yeah, pretty great.
Unbelievable. Really accomplished man. In the state of New Jersey, in high school, in the amateur wrestling ranks in New Jersey, he was an incredible wrestler. Hey man, him and Candido used to, wrestle and grapple and just, play around in the backyard. And like, he just, he took up wrestling very early. He was an amateur wrestling prodigy, and just you'd never know it from his gimmick and from him using the chair and being the hardcore chair swinging freak. But a very, very accomplished wrestler, absolutely.
Now, out in the crowd, Balls Mahoney gets hit in the face with a chair and he juices here. RVD follows up with a plancha from the ring out into the crowd, and at one point, Rob Van Dam superplexed Balls Mahoney, and the weight of the two coming down actually bounced RVD straight up off of the mat. I mean, just to kind of give you a feeling for just how big Balls Mahoney was. At one point, RVD managed to do a monkey flip on Mahoney, and later he gets him in a Northern Light suplex and holds Balls Mahoney up in the air before Balls Mahoney counters with a DDT. And that's something for Rob Van Dam that we don't really think about too often whenever we think about RVD. We think about his athleticism. We think about the kicks and the chair shots and flying off the top rope, but really just how physically strong Rob Van Dam. That's something that a lot of people forget about him, I think.
Yeah, Rob's an amazing athlete. Just dexterous, agile, flexible, strong. Just a really, really versatile athlete.
Now, at this point in the match, Balls Mahoney clocks Rob Van Dam with a chair, but Bill Alfonso makes the save on the ensuing pinfall. And while Balls is distracted, RVD comes off the top rope and delivers a Van Terminator. Rob Van Dam then follows up with a 5-star frog splash, gets the pinfall, retains the TV title. The match goes for 19 minutes and 39 seconds. It gets 2 stars in the Observer. I think you could be a little bit more generous with it, but not a bad rating nonetheless for these two.
Yeah, really solid match, unexpected. Again, a way to showcase Balls and all of the things that he can do. And that he, the same way we saw Just Incredible have to adapt and wrestle Sabu's style is the same way here we had to see Balls Mahoney step out of what was known to be his element and wrestle a style that's more conducive to Rob Van Dam.
What I am curious about is, was this engineered to be a surprise to have Balls Mahoney face Rob Van Dam for the TV title, or was there a reason to remove Johnny Smith from that match?
That I don't know. That, I'd be the wrong person to ask on that. A lot of the booking was probably done on the day of the show, based on finding out who's hurt, who can go, ICP, are they going to be there? Are they not going to be there? That was a lot of the time where some of the last minute booking for a pay-per-view might be done on the Saturday or that day on the Sunday. And you'd have to ask Paul Heyman, the genius, the architect behind it all, the mad scientist, why the ingredients all got placed where they did. We talked about how some of it was, the Raven and Tommy Dreamer match had great placement, and the Tazz match had great kind of logistics as to why this was done, why that was done. So we've talked about some of the devices and some of the clever booking, but, some of it is transparent and it's, there for the world to see. And if you know what you're looking for, you can analyze these great booking decisions. Some of the booking decisions might have been made out of necessity. And, some of the ones that were made, I think the only man who maybe knows why would be Paul Heyman.
Now, after the match, Rob Van Dam and Balls Mahoney hug in the center of the ring, and the show goes off the air after we're shown some clips highlighting the night's action as Joey Styles recaps the pay-per-view. Now, in the Observer, Dave Meltzer would say that Anarchy Rulz 99 was one of the best pay-per-view shows in company history, and also put on in front of the largest crowd in ECW history as well. But he mentions here that the upper card matches were all good, but ECW has a glaring lack of depth in the undercard. I'm curious to get your take on that, what you thought about the undercard situation there. And also, we talked about the House of Hardcore as well. I mean, what role was the House of Hardcore playing in building up the undercard for ECW?
Yeah, House of Hardcore, the school run by Tazz, and Perry Saturn was there as well, was pivotal in our development of the young talent that was coming through. It was our little NXT, so to speak, and it was our way of getting people ready to be ECW wrestlers.
All in all, man, it's a great pay-per-view. I highly recommend you go back and watch it. especially if you've never seen ECW before, or if you just remember ECW as being sort of, I don't know, blood and guts wrestling, just hardcore wrestling, whatever. I mean, there's a little bit of something for everybody here. And Joel, you and I even talked about this earlier in the week, how I really felt like this pay-per-view was showcasing a more refined product from ECW.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to ever call ECW structured. It was always kind of, it wasn't even order among chaos. It was disorder among chaos. But yeah, there was a lot of, it was that 7-course or 9-course meal. It was the comedy melding into the character development, melding into the hardcore with New Jack. It was the good booking and psychology. It was the great in-ring activity, and it was the great bell to bell between the ropes action. It was just, I could agree with that this was a more refined product, so to speak.
Yeah, it really makes you think of just what could have been if ECW would have been around a little bit longer, but I think we'll be talking about that a lot over the course of this podcast, folks. But there you have it. Anarchy Rulz 1999. We thank you for joining us here on this episode of this new podcast journey that we're going on here, really. Joel, anything else you want to add to Anarchy Rulz, or do you think we're done here?
I think it's great to be with you, not just as co-hosts on the 69-Minute Eargasm, but it's great to finally be here with Extreme Championship Wednesday. It's been a long time in coming, and Anarchy Rulz 99 is a great starting off point for us, and we are going to go through case by case, show by show, talent by talent. We're going to go all through the history of ECW, and I'll try to be as honest and as detailed and as thoughtful about my answers to the questions that you have for me as possible. We hope to make it a really, really unique, great, and fun show that is going to be a really, really good counterpart to the 69-Minute Eargasm, which we want you all to go take a listen to if you haven't already.
Yeah, we are a tried and true duo, just like Casey and JoJo here. We hope.